Okay, we're going to pick up with new weapons and technology of World War I. And I want to first just go through an overview of some of the new weapons that may not really seem new to us today because they are commonly used in war, but were very new and progressive for World War I. So the first one is machine guns. Machine guns were used as a defensive weapon. It's kind of too hard to carry around to like attack an enemy, so it was more stationary and you would attack someone coming towards you. And the Germans used machine guns more so than any of the other countries during World War I. The second weapon we're going to talk about is tanks. Tanks were first introduced by the British military. And the pictures show you some of the early on tanks that were used. They provided a means of transportation by protecting the soldiers inside because it was bulletproof. Now some of the older tanks, the original tanks, were a little slower than ones we see in today's wars, but eventually, you know, with more development, they kind of progress. But I do want you to know that the British and the French produced the most tanks. Germany was not really convinced that the tanks were usable, which is why, if you look at the numbers on the screen, it shows that they did not produce as many throughout the course of World War I. You don't have to actually know those numbers for the tests. Alright, airplanes, and then we'll get to Zeppelins as well. Aircraft went under many improvements during World War I. Because, you know, planes already existed, but it's the first time planes are going to be kind of used as a weapon. So they started equipping airplanes with machine guns to be used as fighter planes. And the planes would also be used to gather intelligence about the enemy's position by like flying into enemy territory. Now there's one fighter pilot I want you to be aware of, and he's a German fighter pilot. His name is Manfred von Richthofen, and his name is spelled for you on the screen, but his more important name is his nickname. He's known as the Red Baron. And the Red Baron is the most successful German fighter pilot. He won countless land battles in the sky. Not land battles, sorry. He won countless battles in the sky. Like over 80, I think. But you don't have to know the number. Zeppelins are introduced during this time. A Zeppelin is essentially a blimp or an airship. If you've ever been to like Red Zeppelin Pizza on Perkins and you wondered why there's a big red blimp, it's because a Zeppelin is a blimp. Germans created Zeppelins to carry out bombing raids. Other than that, they weren't really efficient as a wartime weapon because they're very large and all they can really do is drop bombs. They're not as fast as planes. Now submarines are an important weapon during this war. World War I is the first war in which submarines are used as a weapon. And Germany was the first to use them against ships in the Atlantic. The Germans called them U-boats. And we'll talk later about how Germany begins carrying out unrestricted submarine warfare. We'll talk about that later, but essentially these submarines could not be detected at this point because radar is not really a thing yet, underwater radar, and so you did not know when your enemy was near you, and they began attacking even merchant ships. So they are very aggressive with their use of submarine attacks. Another kind of progressive weapon that was invented at this time is gas warfare. It was really very horrific during the war. The Germans were the first to use it, but all sides will eventually use gas warfare. It was really effective because there weren't gas masks yet. So everyone could be exposed to it. You didn't even really, we didn't even really know when it was coming. The two types of gas that were used during World War I were chlorine gas and mustard gas. And the thing with chlorine is it's odorless, but it does burn. So like I know some of y'all think you know what chlorine smells like, but the actual chemical, it doesn't have like, the scent of it was a burning sensation, and once it was released into the air, it was pretty uncontrollable. So it was usually used to like stun the enemy and then attack them. It was lethal in like large amounts, but mustard gas was a blistering agent, so it would, if it came into contact with your skin, it would burn you. So this was particularly cruel and horrific. And this is just a quick note about flamethrowers. They were used for the first time in World War I. Used to like flush enemies from outside of their trenches, but they weren't that super practical because you did have to be kind of in close range to use them. Alright, and the main tactic I want to talk about is trench warfare. A lot of the weapons we discussed were defensive weapons. And so you're going to use defensive hold on one second. You just like push it. It's like just being stubborn. Thank you. Sorry, some multimedia girls were recording something. Just wanted to close my door all the way. Okay, trench warfare. So because all the weapons were defensive, you kind of then rely on a defensive war strategy or tactic to fight. If all your weapons are more for a defensive stance, then you don't go on the offensive. So this is how trench warfare is going to evolve. Essentially, both sides of the war would dig out these large trench systems to where the soldiers could remain like underground and then emerge with their weapons like machine guns to fire on any enemy coming towards them. So they're more protected in their trenches, if that makes sense. And you would live in the trench. There's like rooms in the trench. quarters and command posts in the trench, and in France particularly, and through Belgium, there was like over 400 miles of trenches. So you could walk across France, like completely underground, completely protected. But it was very dangerous because no one wants to be the attacker and approach an enemy trench when they know their enemy is going to have defensive weapons on them to be able to shoot and hurt them and kill them. And so most men don't even ever see their enemy when they actually are fighting. The middle ground between the two trenches was called no man's land. And this was very, very a dangerous area, obviously, because you were exposed to the people who were peeking out from the trench and could kill you. Now, conditions in the trenches, honestly, it was pretty awful, kind of as displayed in the picture, so don't look if you're upset by it. Everything was usually damp or wet or cold during the majority of World War I. There was diseases that spread easily, and there were rats everywhere. It's just really not ideal conditions at all. One illness that came from the trenches is known as trench foot, which was caused when your feet just had an extreme exposure to like the damp and unsanitary cold conditions, and so your feet would basically get infected because of that. And just one more note about the trenches: they could be anywhere from 75 yards to 1 mile apart, in the sense of between you and your enemy. And sometimes if someone controlled an area of the trench before their enemy was really present there, they could set out barbed wire traps to where when your enemy attempted to attack you at night, they would get stuck in the barbed wire and then you could attack them. Just very, very violent, ugly, dirty kind of fighting. And we'll talk about the effectiveness later on, but it's going to really prolong the war because it's hard to gain ground and to win when both sides are taking on this defensive stance. Alright, there's one more thing I quickly want to go over today, and I don't have that PowerPoint open. Let me see if I can get it real fast. Alrighty, just going to go over two quick things really fast, y'all, starting the Western Front. So, the Western Front, I want you to know, first of all, that the World War I is known as a two-front war, because there's fighting going on in two different locations, Western Europe and Eastern Europe. And, of course, we are predominantly going to talk about Western Europe because we are more concerned with what's happening on the Western Front. We will fight the majority of the war in the West, since we are closest to the West. Okay? And that's where most of the major battles happened anyway. The Schlieffen Plan is something that starts early on in the war. Alfred von Schlieffen was the German Army's chief of staff. And he was ordered to come up with a strategy to attack France, basically. He wanted to prevent a joint attack by the British and French into Germany, because that would be pretty devastating for them. So he wants to kind of go on the offensive. So what this plan he devises comes down to is this. He called for using 90% of the German armed forces to attack France in one single wave. It would be like a great arm of soldiers cutting through Belgium, which if you look at the map, Belgium sits between part of France and Germany. They don't want to come through the part of Germany that connects to France, because France is more fortified there. They want to kind of do more of a sneak attack. So they would cut through Belgium and attack France, forcing a surrender. However, the plan did not work as effectively as the Germans hoped, because the Belgian army was able to hold off the German attack. The Germans kind of underestimated the ability of the Belgian army, and by the Belgians holding off the Germans, this gave France a little time to prepare for a coming invasion. So they were a little more prepared to fight the Germans overall. And we'll talk about some of these major land battles that happened in France starting tomorrow. So y'all have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow.